Shabbat Shalom. One of the most powerful images and memories that I have from my many trips to Israel and periods living there, is looking out to the desert from the French Hill neighborhood, which is close to Hebrew University. My family lived there when I was 7 years old. Before that, we lived other parts of Jerusalem. And I remember running up and down the apartments. The apartments are set built into the hill, overlooking the desert and the dust. You can see all the way to Amman, to Jordan. We had a little combined Sephardic Ashkenazic synagogue. The bottom of the hill, it was always just on the edge of the refugee camps, and always surrounded by burned grasses almost the entire year. And then in later years, I would visit friends and family friends there, especially Yossi Halevi, the author who's been here before to speak, and his family. And I remember many times looking out the window onto that beautiful Judean desert, all the way to the Dead Sea on a good day. And he's also spoken about what that feels like. When I was young and I would look out there to the hills, they were almost all empty, a few houses here or there. But then over the years, those hills began to fill up. Soon they became whole villages connected to the refugee camps. And soon garbage trucks began to take garbage up to the top of the hill and burn it on the whole top of the hill. It was mostly a typical Jerusalem neighborhood, a little closer to the tension lines of the conflict than others. But then in the late 80s, the first Intifada broke out, and our family took a break from the area, got a little too intense. Helicopters circling above, sometimes bullets would hit the balconies of the homes, cars would be firebombed in the morning. It was living in the real Middle East. And then during the second Intifada, when the buses were exploding around Jerusalem, I remember coming back and visiting and noticing there were more undercover policemen patrolling the streets and routinely stopping people. I remember they even once stopped me when I was coming back from a year in Nepal, wondering, did I look suspicious or something? But there were a few attacks, and even several times arsonists set fire to those hills of burnt grasses, with huge fires burning up to the sky. And then over all of it, over that iconic view of the desert, the separation wall also went up, right through the middle of all of it, cutting through all the scenery, ominous. Now, I share these memories, and they've always evoked within me a powerful feeling for the preciousness, the power of the land of Israel and our return, and also that feeling of seeing something that one loves change before your eyes. Seeing something change and worrying about it. Will it ever be the same that it once was? This in a week where the Israeli government dissolved its own self, and most likely leading to another round of elections, and the possibility that the new government in the fall will have very extreme, told a few years ago, unimaginable elements as part of it, followers of Meir Kahane, open racists. And the coalition that had to dissolve itself was such an improbable amalgamation of different political parties from the left, from the right, from the center, religious nationalists, Islamicists, Arab Israelis, and their words trying to come together for the common good of the country. Now, that held a promise. We know that in the strong sun of the Middle East, promises do not always fulfill themselves. And so Israel is back into that unknown space, a space needing prayers and faith and the balance. And yet perhaps this is where so much of life occurs. So much of life is revealed in that space in between. And this is the space of our parsha that we read this morning, of the spies who scouted out the land, the promised land. And they sent out those 12 scouts. Is it a good land? Is it fortified or is it not fortified? Can we take it? And when those 12 spies set out, they did not know what we know, the continuation of the story. They did not know how much it was in the balance. They did not know that because of them, this people would have to spend 40 more long years in the harsh desert, in the hot wilderness. They were just living in that space, trying to figure it out. That's life, that space where all life hangs. They knew, yes, it's a beautiful land. It's a land that they dreamed of possessing. It had everything they needed. But yet, would they be able to thrive in it? Would they be able to build the future they had been speaking about for so long? Was it possible? Was it realistic? It was both far away and not so far. Yes or no? We can imagine, and we know how it got to the princes, those little voices telling them, no, you can't do it, the lack of courage, and eventually the balance shifting to one side. So we're just as grasshoppers in the sight of the people there. There's no way we can do it. And two of the spies, Caleb and Joshua, on the other hand, they listened to a different voice within. And their voice said, yes, it is possible. We can do it. God is with us. So the age-old question is, the question from the commentators for so long is, what was the difference between them? We speak about this often. The difference was one of perception. But Nachmanides, Ramban, he says, what was the difference between them? He adds, the two spies who went out also had prayers on their lips. What does that mean? What do the words of prayers even do? He said they kept them centered and full. And they made their minds even as they saw all the challenges ahead. And reassured them that they were worthy of creating their dream that they dreamt for so long in the land of milk and honey. The tefillot were just a symbol of how the two spies were choosing to live their very lives. They're choosing, despite it all, to live with faith, to live their lives with optimism, to live their lives with hope, to live their lives. We can do it. And so often we stand in the balance of those two voices and how it dictates how we meet all the challenges of our lives, to our relationships, to our nation, to our dreams, which way to turn. It's just the same view, the same objective view. The perspective is different eyes. And so where Israel will go with all of the heat of all of its pressures, what we'll do to it in the coming months and years, for this country too, the decision yesterday and where that will lead, and amid all of the other intensities and pressures, the world, Ukraine. So we stand in the middle. The view is truly the same objectively for all of us. And we wonder, what is happening here? Are we going to be able to build the world that we dream of? Or are we going to mess it all up? And the message of our parsha is that it is in our hands. How we choose to perceive and how we choose to dwell in our own minds and hearts, and then to turn it into actions. How we walk in the world with those actions, with prayers of hope on our lips, and to keep seeing the possibility, to never tire of fighting for what we believe in, whatever way we can. And walls are built, often for good reason, and views are obscured, but they can also be cleared. They can also come down. So we accept the consequences of the world that we live in, while always striving to find the courage to fight anew, and pray for the infinite grace of the Almighty who created it and us. Shabbat Shalom.